Please note, for maximum picture quality, it may be necessary to adjust the tracking control on your VCR.
Sometimes a film gets at the human condition so deeply that it comes to define and name an element of how we think and interact with our own idea of truth and memory. The Rashomon effect has come as a shorthand for the lie of objective truth. What you believe, basically, depends on where you stand. Or how you adjust your tracking. Does that work? That doesn't really work.
I like it. Leave it.
We go. This is Adjust Your Tracking, a podcast where we're on an adventure to watch a century of cinema, decade by decade, year by year. I am one half of your hosts, Liam Delaney, and he is...
I am Oliver Jones' son.
He is Oliver Jones. Hey. And it's... and I'm just
it's funny you were saying that. I literally was looking at the Rashomon effect Wikipedia page as you were saying that.
Awesome. See? It's kind of cool because it is what I know this film about. Like, I never watched this film before, but I knew what this film was because I know what the Rashomon effect is, and I know like the thousands of TV shows and other films and cartoons that have done Rashomon episodes as like a trope.
Yeah.
Like, that's all I really knew. And
well, I've heard of the Rashomon effect, but I didn't know if it was. I didn't know if the film Rashomon was based on that.
Oh yeah, which came first?
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
No. So because I knew nothing about this film coming into it, and like we'll get into it later on.
Yeah,
but
totally.
The main focus of this film, one of them, is that it's features a rape.
Yes, it absolutely does. Thanks for bringing that right up. I think we're just going to have to understand that the entirety of human civilization has been very aggressive towards women.
Yes.
And until recently, I don't think anyone thought about it. And that's just the product of going back in time and watching these films. It's going to happen, apparently.
Well, I kind of thought this was going to be more of like a Hidden Fortress kind of. Do you know what I mean? Like more of like a samurai versus, I don't know,
well, like a Yojimbo or something like that.
Yeah, something like that. Not. But I mean, don't get me wrong. We'll get into it later. What we saw, I thought was great. But
sure.
But yeah, how you doing anyway? You okay?
I'm okay. It feels like Adjust Your Tracking after dark. It's like it's not even a late night record, and it's pitch black because the winter sucks. Like, and it just drains all energy out of me. It just gets me like depressed. I think they call it SAD, don't they? Seasonal affective disorder, I think they call it.
Yeah. I mean, it's not even 5 o'clock yet.
No, and it's just pitch dark, and it's horrible. I hate the winter.
Especially, I live my life in darkness anyway, so it makes no difference to me.
You were born in it. It's not a very good Bane.
I was raised in it. I was animated in it. Yeah.
I can't do a good Bane.
Oh, I did a Instagram live yesterday. It was.
Oh, did you for the new video?
It was horrific. I mean, to be honest, it turned out all right, but
you're a seasoned broadcaster now.
It was just awkward. Like, loads of people constantly asking questions, like the same question, like what program do you animate in? What do you use to animate with? And it's like people have never. Like, I have to remember that not everybody's an animator and not everybody actually understands the process. And like, I'm thinking, well, plasticine obviously it's got a metal armature in it, and it's called Dragon Frame. Everybody knows that. Duh. Did
you like? I mean, could you see yourself as being one of those people once in time? Like, were you once those persons on like a Q&A, not Instagram Live, obviously, but asking kind of just?
No, not really. I guess I've always been a person that kind of likes to figure stuff out for myself anyway. And I've never really watched tutorials and stuff like that. I kind of just bumble my way through things, and I'll probably do everything completely wrong. So.
Yeah, well, you do it your way, like Sinatra.
Yeah. But what was awkward was because we're going to do a third video.
Yeah,
they were kind of getting me to kind of talk about the new video on the chat and
sure.
And I didn't feel comfortable like just spitballing those ideas out. That was a bit weird. But Jack's lovely. Who's the lead singer guitarist, and that was fun.
It's the truth about creative process and making films and making serialized content that the audience likes to think that everything exists in like stone at some point when you first start the first thing you ever write. And like there are creators that sell themselves on this. They sell the lie. It's not true. And leads to like a fan backlash eventually when they realise it's not true.
Well, it's like, this is what I find irritating, is like, okay, the new Star Wars films, they didn't turn out great. And everyone's like, oh, they didn't have a plan from the beginning. It's like, George Lucas didn't have a fucking plan back in 77. Do you know what I mean? Just sometimes things work out well and sometimes they don't.
No, exactly. And it's like TV, it's like Lost. Like, they didn't know what they were doing from the start. They just wanted to tell you they did because it made you more invested in it. And they kind of want to they kind of want to get that kind of fan community that will dig into everything that's on screen, that Green Lantern comic book with a polar bear, you know, and stuff like that. Like, and
but also as a creator, I don't think you want to have every idea set in stone, because that would be boring. Because you're kind of filling it in by numbers. Then you kind of want to, just like the audience, you're kind of exploring these characters as well yourself, and the world they live in, and you kind of want to, you know, kind of go on along the adventure with them as well. And otherwise, you know, it's just going to be boring for you.
And there's different ways of writing. Some people do write themselves into holes sometimes, you know. They just, instead of having a plan, they've kind of got to a point when they thought, fuck, I don't know how to get out of this now. And that's that's the adventure.
George R. Martin.
George R. Martin's very famous for it, yeah, because that's the reason books got so delayed, is because he got stuck on a plot point and he couldn't keep going forward. So he threw out an entire book. And started again and stuff like that. So that happens. That's what the creative process is. You should actually finish it as well, George. But
the series, as of early next year, the series will have ended 2 years ago.
God, good point. That's incredible. And I remember when the last book came out, I was living in Northampton. And
oh God, was that long ago?
Yeah, and my
was that before you went to Qatar?
It was, yeah. And my housemate, I remember we finished work. We were doing a site in Norfolk, and we drove to like Warstones to get the new George R. Martin book. That's how long ago that was, like. And he's not finished a book since. Insane. And he's made a lot more money since. So fair play, George. Like,
yeah. Doesn't he write his books in DOS and stuff like that? Hasn't he kind of?
He's got like a BBC Micro or something, hasn't he? Isn't he quite famous for it? He uses a proper, like, just like kind of yellow screened computer or something. Like,
is that just because you have no distractions and you're kind of just focused on what you're doing? Then
that's what he says. Yeah.
I'm sure he's got a flipping iPhone next to him and a TV on to the right.
I would argue that a lot of writers are, or a lot of, not just a lot of writers, but a lot of people are quite superstitious or stuck in their ways, or a little bit kind of geeky and nerdy. I think that just plays into it probably a little bit more than because you can turn your internet connection off if you want.
Yeah, that's very true.
You can even get those programs, can't you? I don't know if you've ever seen them, that'll block your internet and block certain sites for a certain amount of time. So
okay.
So like they'll say like it's kind of like some kind of like, you know, iron wall or something, that for the next 2 hours you're not allowed to access Twitter or something, and it forces you to kind of get some work done.
I think the process in filmmaking, the hardest part for me is the writing part. This is why that's why I leave it to you and
that's why I don't
and stuff. Like I love plotting. I love doing that.
Plotting's a lot of fun. I agree.
But like actually getting down and writing something, I find really frustrating.
Yeah, it's
just, it can be quite. You get lost in it a lot, really, sometimes, and
you've got to have the freedom to be able to bounce back and forth in it. I think a lot of people get very linear in their writing, and they always feel like as soon as something's put down, then that's done. And actually, I think at least the way I've always written is I always just try and jump around in what I'm doing and throw ideas out and throw dialogue out and throw things out and then go back to it and change stuff around and stuff. I think you've got to be really fluid with it, and at least kind of nowadays that allows you that a bit more than it used to.
I tell you what, I find it hard looking at the screen to write. So what I've done recently, I've taken the Chris Carter, Vince Gilligan approach, and where I actually write post-it notes. Okay. So it makes it more visual.
I tell you what I do for everything I write. This is if I'm writing academic stuff or whatever. I use Notepad tons. Actually, just Windows Notepad. My desktop is always full of .txt's. And I throw shit in it, loads of shit in it, like post-it notes, just like digital post-it notes, basically. And I find it easier to throw stuff onto that and then use like Word to kind of write properly, but just to throw notes around in like .txt's.
I'd say
always
what I
done
like. The reason why I like the post-it notes because it's almost like looking at a timeline of editing.
Yeah,
because you can actually see the flow of the film then, and then and then you build upon those post-it notes with dialogue ideas and stuff. Like
do you do different colours for dialogue or different colours for action? Different colours for characters,
So I'll
stuff
do
that,
you get a pad and you've kind of got pink,
yellow,
and kind of mix it up a little bit.
No, that's really cool.
Yeah.
I really think that's a good idea. I think it's probably what they do in writers' rooms a lot now, anyway.
I mean, I'm not as good as Vince Gilligan or Chris Carter, but it helps.
It helps. Every little helps. Oh, that's a tagline for something, isn't it?
So, have you watched anything recently?
I've been incredibly busy, so not really. I was. I can't remember what. Did I tell you last time that I watched the new Sophie Coppola? I think I mentioned that. That's one of the last things
I think you mentioned it afterwards in the after chat.
Oh, did I? Was it when we were just finishing? Well, that's probably the last film I watched then.
And what's it called?
On the Rocks with Bill Murray and someone else.
I want to say Melissa McCarthy, but that's not.
No,
right,
it's definitely not Melissa McCarthy. It's the girl from Community.
Karen. No, Gillian Jacobs.
No, it's not from Community. I'm wrong. It's Rashida Jones. From,
Rashida Jones.
Parks and
Her
Rec.
dad is Quincy Jones.
Really? I didn't know that.
Yeah, you do now.
I do now. Yeah, Bill Murray, Rashida Jones, and Marlon Wayans. And it's a very Sofia Coppola film, and I loved it. And I think if you like Sofia Coppola, you'll like it. If you don't, then you'll hate it.
I love Lost in Translation.
Me too. Yeah.
What's the one with? Is it Somewhere?
Somewhere, yeah, I love Somewhere.
Somewhere's great.
I love the Beguiled. It was one of my favourite films that year.
I didn't watch that one, and I
Virgin
didn't watch
Suicides.
Mary and Antoinette either.
Oh, I like Mary Antoinette. It's fun. Virgin Suicides is wonderful. Have you seen that?
Oh yes,
yeah.
I forgot about that one.
The only one I actually haven't seen is Bling Ring. Actually. So,
I've seen Bling Ring. Oh, was that her? Did she direct that?
Yeah.
Yeah, I watched that because Caroline really enjoyed that one. But it's a true story about the kids who kind of just go around robbing famous people's houses.
Is that right?
They don't rob. I don't know if they rob them. They go in and they just kind of like live in their shoes, like they're trying their clothes on and stuff like. Do you know what I mean? Just
sure.
Kind of like
just that obsession or something. Like
yeah.
No, I need to watch that. I haven't got around to watching it, but I really like her, and I really liked this as well. And it's I can understand. I can just. It's like all of her films. If someone tells me they don't like it, it's you can see why. It's just one of those things. But I thought Bill Murray was fantastic in it. It's a bit of you can see it as a bit of not a sequel, but the same kind of energy to Lost in Translation and stuff like that. Like, though he's playing a very different character, and a character you wouldn't normally see Bill Murray play, though he brings a lot of energy to it, which I thought was really good.
Like Bill Murray feels like Bill Murray almost in Lost in Translation.
Lost in Translation.
It feels like where does Bill Murray start in the character? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Whereas this, he's not. He's not playing what people think of Bill Murray. Kind of idea of him as a celebrity. He's playing something different, but I really like it, and it's. I think people get the problem with Sofia Coppola is she makes movies about like rich people, and I think that gets people's backs up a lot sometimes, because it's hard to sometimes feel emotionally connected to people like that who are incredibly privileged and incredibly rich. I think it's sometimes hard to kind of get that about her. It's why she was perfect to make the Mary and Antoinette film. I think perfect subject for her, really. But I think when it works really well, and I loved it. So
I mean, it's always a tricky thing when someone comes from such a privileged background, but at the same time, they are talented, so you can't take that away from them. Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely. Yourself, are you watching anything recently?
Yeah, I've watched. I watched the entire series of Watchmen.
Oh, have you?
Going back to Lost, it feels very Lost-like the way it's kind of put together. But I thought it was very good actually.
Awesome.
The journey is better than the destination.
Okay.
But I did like how it all came together and stuff. I just think some characters kind of got a bit of kind of went by the wayside by the end.
Okay.
But as a follow-on it's not a follow-on from the film, it's a follow-on from the comic book, which I found
good.
Obviously it's good for me, but for people like Caroline who's only seen the film and hasn't read the book, she was like, "What's this squid?" And
so
I'm
they
like,
actually have the squid. Good.
Yeah, you see it as well. So it has flashbacks to like 85 where you see the squid in New York.
Wow.
And it made me angry in the film. Like, you think, why, of all the things you cut out of the film, why did you cut that out? Because that's so important.
Snyder has no idea what he's doing, that's why.
And, like, you know, like, that film looks nice, it sounds nice, and, you know, but he kind of, it's like he misses the point about everything about
Yes. Yeah, it is. He doesn't get to grips with actually what makes the story the story. He never does. Yeah. None of his films do that. You know, that's the problem. He doesn't actually get to the grips, to the bottom of it. I shouldn't shit on him all the time, but like, he just annoys me because he just gets these properties I love and then doesn't deal with them.
Yeah.
You know, like, so it's always like a target for my ire.
But it's got. But like when it first was announced, like everyone thought, oh, they're just going to adapt the the comic book series. But what they do is it's set in contemporary, like modern day America. So it's 2019, and it's basically the police now wear masks.
Okay.
Superhero vigilantes don't exist, but there are but you have police officers who kind of look like superheroes, kind of almost.
Yeah.
But it's like watching it in 2020, like, you know, there's a lot to do with race and the police, and then everybody's wearing masks. So it kind of feels very apt at the moment.
Yeah, good point.
The music is really good. It's by Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross.
Oh, is it by Trent Reznor?
So it feels very kind of Nine Inch Nails and stuff. And,
what was I watching the other day with Nine Inch Nails? Oh, I watched Alien 3.
Is Nine Inch Nails in Alien 3?
Didn't Trent Reznor do the soundtrack for Alien 3?
I don't think so.
Did I make?
He definitely did. Like, he definitely did his later films.
Yeah. Maybe I made
I don't know if Nine Inch Nails were around. Nine Inch Nails were around in '89. Pretty Hate Machine came out in '89. But anyway, what was I going to say? Yeah, so Regina King is like the lead character in it. She's fantastic. I forgot what her character's called. Is it it's called the Sister Knight, and she kind of looks like a blaxploitation nun kind of thing going on.
Yeah.
You've got Ya Abdul Mateen, and he plays her husband. But there's something more with him that's quite interesting. Tim Blake Nelson is in it, and he plays a character called the Looking Glass, and he has a mask on that's basically like a mirror.
Cool.
And Tim Blake Nelson is one of my favourite character actors. I really like him.
Yeah, totally.
Like, you know, he's in Oh Brother Out There. He's the one who kind of wants to get baptised and stuff like that.
Yeah. I think is he the lead of Buster Scruggs? Is that right?
I think so, yeah. That's the one I haven't seen. I haven't seen that one, and I haven't seen Hail Caesar yet either, so I need to get on.
I liked both of those a lot.
But who else is in it? You've got Don Johnson. You've got Jeremy Irons plays Ozymandias.
Cool, good casting.
And I really like his part of the story is really bizarre, but it's quite cool how it connects later on in the film. The show.
The 9-hour film.
Yeah, it's definitely worth a watch, and it's a very worthy sequel to the comic book. I think it's not what I expected, but it was very pleasant.
I'll try it. I keep meaning to, but I just don't get around to it.
But I just think a lot of these long form TV shows, and I quite like the fact that this is a one off. It's just not going to be.
Me too. I really respected him that he just went, no, I'm not doing any more. This was meant to be just this. Like,
well, I mean, there's only so many times you can do an end of the world scenario kind of storyline. Do you know what I mean? And I just don't think they had the ending just felt a little bit anticlimactic, and I think, you know, that's still one of the things that TV.
Thing?
Yeah, I mean, like Game of Thrones had quite a very big spectacle ending, didn't it? And I mean, whether or not you liked it, that's besides the point. But I think, they just didn't have enough money to do. Well, I don't know what their ending would have been. The ending they probably filmed as the ending they had, but it just didn't feel like it kind of met the rest of it for me. There's some great character building stuff. I mean, like Hooded Justice plays a big part in it, and he's really cool how they use that character.
Yeah, cool.
And then what else have I watched? I watched an old wrestling documentary called Beyond the Mat?
Beyond the Mat. God, yeah, I saw that in the 90s, I think. Oh,
yeah, it came out in 99, and
2000s,
I don't know, just a friend recommended it to me, and I thought it was a new documentary, and I was like thinking, is this the right one? It's like 20,
it's like 20 years old.
But like, you know, I knew that wrestling was obviously everyone knows it's fake and all this stuff, and everyone knows
it's not fake.
Even
it's
as fake as it
pre-scripted.
is, it's still brutal as fuck. People get hurt. And,
Yeah, it's not fake. It's just scripted. It's predetermined.
yeah, it's just scripted.
That's
yeah.
the best way to put it.
But like the biggest shock for me was to see like how the wrestlers like dealt with their everyday life. So like Jake the Snake Roberts is like a crack addict, and like finding out
really,
like
really tough
you know
time.
that he is a product of rape. Basically, his mother was, you know, you found out that his dad was dating his mother's mother and raped her daughter. It's just, and then you see his relationship with his dad in it, and you think, this is just bizarre. And then you find out his sister was murdered and all this kind of stuff. And then, but then you see like people like The Rock later on in it, and you can just see how they're so different. They're in the same world, but one person is kind of laser focused. He's got his shit together.
Yeah.
And this other guy who's still just as talented and as smart, but for some reason it's just, you know, you can't help but feel really bad for them. And you know, is Vince McMahon exploiting them? You know,
yes.
Probably yes. You know, you know, it's just sad. And then who's the other guy in it? He's
Mick Foley plays a big role in it.
But he comes across
Funk.
as a very kind of centered person, though.
He
like,
is, yeah.
A little bit misguided in places, but he's got a very good heart. And,
Yeah, he does.
you know,
Yeah, he's a big
He's
heart.
definitely like a family man, and he puts that. I think he puts that first.
Yeah. Terry
But, you
Funk
know, you
is
see-
another one.
Terry Funk, that's who I
Yeah.
was thinking of.
Yeah.
Who's a guy who retires in it, and then in the credits at the end, it's
He
like
never stops
3 months later he's back in the ring.
I'm not even sure if he's retired now. Like,
Yeah, he's 73 now,
Yeah.
I think.
I know it's a product of wrestling. It's a thing that it's really difficult to walk away from because it's your life and it's like adrenaline and stuff like that. But also because of the nature of wrestling, these people don't make a ton of money. They don't have any other education. They don't have anything else to fall back on. A lot of them, because, you know, they're traveling all the time, they never see their family.
Families.
They
they're
often end up with
separated,
broken
yeah.
homes and stuff like that. They often then divorce settlings and stuff like that. They're often, and their health insurance isn't covered by the organizations. Like the WWE doesn't pay them health insurance, so they spend so much money on these broken bodies they have by the time they're like 32 or something. Like, you know, head injuries is obviously going away now, but that used to be a massive thing. And it's
Well,
just
there was
like,
the one who killed his family, wasn't there?
yeah, Benoit,
I forgot
yeah.
his name. Yeah.
Benoit, yeah. And there's so much of that in their wrestling. It's a really sad world, and the thing is, and it's starting to change now because like the fans don't want to see that. They don't want to see you broken. They don't want to see you having like not be able to walk by the time you're 30. They don't want that. So it is starting to shift now that the wrestlers are kind of starting to look after themselves, and hopefully that will be better. But it's not shifting in a corporate sense. The WWE just exploits these people. It's horrible. Like, and it's whatever.
But I noticed a very similar kind of. They feel like rock and roll and wrestling feels very similar. Like, you know, if you're an aging rock star, you're constantly touring.
Yeah.
You're in a hotel room every night. You know, you live it. You know, you can't. You know, you're up till late, so you're probably taking stuff to go to sleep. And, blah, blah. You're
drinking,
hurting because you're running around stage for 2 hours. You're probably aching and hurting. So it felt very similar and very sad as well at the same time. But yet you, like I said, like you have The Rock who's kind of got shit together. You've kind of got these younger rock acts who kind of like. They treat it as like a business, so they kind of have got their shit together. And
you also get the thing that the people like The Rock are privileged in it. They came from a big wrestling family. They were brought up in it. Like they came from. I wouldn't say came from money, but there certainly is that there. There is that change to it as well. People like Orton is another one who came from like a huge family. He's not in that. He was too young to be in that documentary, but he just comes from like a legacy of it, and they tend to have their shit together a little better. Because of that, really. Whereas if you come from like a tiny town in Oklahoma, you know, and you're trying to get into this industry, you're wrestling anything, you know, and you'll do anything. You'll take any kind of bump or any kind of injury in any parking lot you're offered, you know, for a couple of quid just to get noticed and stuff. So it tends to be that different element to it.
Like you see one guy who's like a new wrestler, and obviously his USP is that he can throw up on command.
Oh God!
So Vince McMahon's like, okay, your name is now Puke, and that's what you're gonna do. You're gonna puke, and he's like, okay, he puts like a box in front of him and goes, puke now. Like makes him puke on command in the interview pretty much, and you're like thinking, fucking hell.
Do you know that's Droz? His name is Droz, and he ended up having he ended up getting paralyzed because of wrestling. He took a bump that broke his like spine or something like that, and he ended up in a wheelchair.
Well, it says at the end of the documentary that, you know, he said puke didn't survive. He became a fixture in wrestling, and then he got paralyzed. So is he still to this day unable to walk?
Yeah, he's quadriplegic. He got he took a power bomb that he landed awkwardly on his neck, and broke his neck, and just had an injury. He never walked again. Couldn't use his arms or anything like that. Like it was.
I mean, you know, look,
really wasn't
Owen
long
Hart
after that
as well.
documentary. Yeah. Owen Hart. Yeah, it happens a lot. Like,
I mean, like that could have happened to Mankind when he fell from the cage. Do you know what I mean?
It absolutely could. Like, it absolutely could. That's.
I mean, I think that match alone could have killed him 3 times. Like when he takes the dive off the top and he hits that desk.
That one is probably the safest one they do in that match.
I'm pretty sure I watched that at yours when we were
maybe
like on Friday Night Raw or what. I don't know.
There's one they do. They takes a choke slam on top of the cage, and this was the first time anyone had ever done this, and they thought the cage would take his weight, and it doesn't. The top of the cage just drops open, and he falls through and hits the ring. It's not especially dangerous, but like, one, he wasn't prepared to fall, so he wasn't landing correctly, and 2, there was a chair on the panel that he was on, and the chair falls with him, and he smacks his head off the back of the chair when he lands, like knocking himself out, and the front of the chair hits like his mouth, which pushes a tooth from like his mouth up into his fucking like nose or something. It's ridiculous. It's horrible. Like, these people, they're mental.
I mean, he seems to be quite a like I said though, he seems quite a well-rounded guy, and even now he seems like quite a, you know, I think he obviously doesn't wrestle anymore, does he? I don't think.
No, not for years. No.
He did a documentary though called where he became Santa Claus. I know that.
Yeah, he's obsessed with Santa. That's the one thing I know about Mick Foley. He's absolutely obsessed with Santa.
You had his book, didn't you?
Yeah, I read his first autobiography. Like, yeah, I did. It's good actually, especially when at that time wrestling was still this kind of. It was still doing what they call like kayfabe, where they weren't really talking about themselves as real people. They were trying to push the idea that the characters were real. So like, it was one of these first autobiographies that are kind of lifting the kind of the shroud on what wrestling actually is and stuff, and talking about how it's all, you know, scripted and playing characters and what it means to take moves, and the fact that these people do actually hurt themselves and they do actually doing real stuff. You know, it's just they kind of, you know, they try and do it in a way that's not killing themselves. We should probably move away from wrestling. What we got now, though, is a momentous event, I think, because it's the start of a new miniseries.
Hey.
So, like, hear fanfare. That's Rocky I was doing. I don't Rocky. So we're cutting down to the 1950s now, which is a long time ago, 70 years ago into film.
Yep.
And I don't know why we chose the 1950s more than anything, but more I kind of like 1950s films. I think that's what attracted me to it. It's one of the older periods where I still have a little bit of knowledge, I think, of the films in that era, and I've seen more than some. I think some years I'm going to really struggle to know anything, but the 1950s have still got some kind of like knowledge to it, I think. What about yourself when 1950s? What do you think about 1950s or 1950s in film?
Well, I mean, the whole point of doing this podcast is, like, you know, I've always said I'm a cinephile, but clearly I'm not, because like there's so many gaps in my my knowledge of film and like eras that I watch. You know, like pretty much I'm 70s onwards, and like other than like your Ray Harryhausen and kind of some B movies and stuff, I very rarely go back, which is bad. I think it's bad. There's only a few that I can really name, and you know. Cinderella, because I'm, you know, a Disney fan, animation fan. Yeah. It's not my favourite Disney film though. I mean, I know a lot of people do like it. It's not one of my favourites.
Sure. I don't really like Cinderella, if I'm honest.
Yeah, it's not one of the best.
No.
Like, you know, Sleeping Beauty, which comes out later on in the decade, is good as well. It's not great. It's more style over substance, so I think, with that one. But
that's fair. Well, I really like that film.
What other films do I like? All About Eve.
Yeah, I saw I really like All About Eve. It's a great film.
Yeah.
You get a lot of these films about kind of Hollywood coming up at this point at the moment. So that's Mankiewicz, I think his name is, the director. Yeah. I saw All About Eve this year at the theatre in
cinema. Oh, an actual play.
Theatre production of it. It was it was, I can't remember the theatre name, but it was in London, obviously. It's where theatre lives. And Gillian Anderson was playing the lead character.
Oh, wow. We've seen Gillian Anderson in Fresh. I'm actually jealous. Very jealous.
Very, very connecting tissue of our lives with the X-Files, I think.
Yeah, I could
Gillian
do it.
Anderson especially. She played the Betty Davis role.
Just to talk about the making of the last music video that I did. All I did was listen to Kamal Nanjiani's podcast called The X-Files Files. And it's so blatant that at one point he knew The X-Files was coming back, and he was meeting all the right people to come on his podcast that he knew were writing it. So I think he was trying to get himself on it, which eventually he did. He became the villain in it. Yeah, and as soon as he became a villain on The X-Files, he's like, I can't be bothered with the podcast anymore. I've reached peak X-Files. He was in a good episode, though.
I really liked that episode he's in. Yeah, that was one of the best of the reboots. I didn't watch the newest series. Maybe I should. But
there's a few good ones in that. So yeah, the episode that he's in is basically the person you think is it's Rhys Darby, isn't it? And you think
it is Rhys Darby.
He's kind of confused with what's going on with his life, but basically he was a monster that got bitten by a man, so he's like a wereman or something really weird.
Actually, I would argue that episode's a bit of a Rashomon episode. It's about...
Yeah, it is actually, isn't it?
Yeah, because it's about multiple different narratives of of what people saw and stuff. So.
But anyway, going back to the 50s, the only other film I've seen is Harvey.
I was going to say Harvey, I think, is my... she can correct me, but I think it's my mum's favourite film.
Oh, really?
So I know Harvey
Go on,
really
Beres.
well.
Let us know.
Yeah, let us know, Beres. I didn't call you Beres. Hi, Mom. But yeah, Harvey's wonderful. I love it. It's a big film of my childhood, actually. I saw it a lot. So it's got Jimmy Stewart, who, for my money, is my favourite Golden Age actor. I really, really like James Stewart. I think he was really naturalistic in a kind of way that I think a lot of actors aren't at the time. But yeah, James Stewart playing Harvey, whose best friend's a giant bunny. And...
do you remember that scene in Who Framed Roger Rabbit and the
Harvey
joke? And so as a kid for years and years and years, I was like, I have no idea what he's on about.
Yeah, here's my friend Harvey.
Why did you sound like that?
That's what he's like in Roger Rabbit, isn't it? That's what he does.
He's not like that. He's like, whoa, he's a bit more gruff, isn't he?
Oh yeah, I think I'm doing James Stewart. I'm doing my best James Stewart. That's what I'm doing, which is not a very good James Stewart.
What about you?
Well, yeah, you hit the ones I know. I think I was saying to you before recording, I am halfway through watching Sunset Boulevard because I thought I'd watch it. Yeah. But I just got caught up with work and I couldn't finish it. But Billy Wilder film that's all about the kind of the fact that Hollywood at this point, it's 1950s. It's kind of in the early adult era of if cinema was a person. You've gone through like infancy and childhood and teenage years, and now you're into this kind of adult period of films. And you get a lot of cinema at this point in the 1950s that's looking back at the golden age of cinema, like silent cinema and these big productions, and kind of like almost with nostalgia and saying like, where were we then and how good were we then, kind of stuff. And you get a lot of that
I'd
in the
argue
50s.
The film that we're going to watch like owes a debt massively to silent cinema.
It does.
I mean, you know, like, well, we'll get into it. And
I think, like, generally about the 1950s as a decade of cinema is kind of interesting. It's the first period where cinema, or at least Hollywood, is in decline. So it's the first time it hits a decline since its growth. And the large part of that is because people started having TVs at home in the 1950s, whereas before then they didn't. So really it's the first time that their profits and their money starting really getting impacted by the fact that TV is taking people away from cinemas, and that's reducing the kind of the output and the money that's coming through Hollywood. And because of that, you get a lot of cynical kind of worry kind of films in 1950s in Hollywood. You get a lot of kind of anxiety about where they are, and a lot of stress. And I think we'd both agree that that attitude sometimes leads to greatness. And I think like some of the kind of best, some of these Hollywood people that you know of, like, you know, John Ford, Hitchcock, Billy Wilder, Kasdan, Vincent Minnelli, they produced their best work in the 50s out of this kind of era of a bit more worrisome, a bit more strife, a bit more efforts to do it. And because of that, that kind of strife as well, there is something we'll talk about in a later episode because of the House of Un-American Activities thing, which is a big thing in the 50s that started around 1947 when they're looking for communists in Hollywood and they're kicking out anyone who can possibly be a communist. We'll talk about that in Rafifi because Rafifi wouldn't exist without the House of Un-American Activities. But because of the kind of decline stuff, you get a lot of gimmicky stuff in the 1950s, which I think is really fun. So you get this period where people are trying to use technology to drive people to cinemas rather than just filming. So you get like CinemaScope, VistaVision, Cinerama.
Well, yeah, like Dynamation, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and that to try and say like you have to be in the cinema to watch these. You can't watch it on TV. Like you need a big screen to do this.
Well, which was the insane one where it was literally it was that wide that they had 2 projectors and they had to line it up.
I don't know.
Do you know what I mean? Like it was like super wide. Like it was.
That might be
insane.
Cinerama. That might be Cinerama.
It's like like I think only a few films were made in Cinerama or whatever.
Sure.
It was because it's just insane.
But yeah, like I couldn't tell you the difference between CinemaScope, VistaVision, Cinerama. I'm not that technically. Like,
well, a lot of them were like bullshit terms. They didn't really mean anything. So like Dynamation was just a term, a fake term made up just to make it sound more better than it was. You know, Dyna came from like the name of the flow system on the producer's car. So he was like, "Oh, let's take that."
Sounds
Dyna
good. Yeah. That is so
Nation.
1950s to me. Like that, like adding words and stuff to make it sound futuristic. That's such a big thing in the 50s. Like, and you also get in the 1950s, the similar sort of thing is you get 3D. So 3D did exist in like the 20s or something like that. It's really early technology. The 3D existed, but they bring it back in the 1950s because they're trying to drive people to cinemas. So we actually get a huge amount of 3D films coming out in the 50s. Which is just another gimmick, you know, the same way that it was used in the 80s. I think they bring it back in.
Pretty much, yeah.
And then they use it again like in the 2000s to drive people back into cinemas. So it's just this thing that people do.
Slightly different in the 2000s though, but...
Yeah, but it's a similar sort of thing, just trying to drive
still
people to cinema. Like, that's all they're really trying to do and put their profits up. We won't be watching any 3D films, but like it was a big thing about the 50s, like with 3D films.
Was them not shot in 3D? Was that like a...
That might be actually. We'll have to see.
I'll just have a quick look.
But yeah, you start... What big things about 1950s is like sci-fi films as well, starting getting really big, and that's what like...
Hang on, sorry, going back to them.
Yeah.
Production began in 1953. Originally conceived to be 3D.
There we go.
Test shots in colour and 3D were made. A few colour tests of larger scale and models were also made. But when it was time to shoot in 3D, basically it was scrapped. So it was going to be shot in 3D, but wasn't in the end. Next.
We'll get to them in the series as well. That's cool. Not much more to say, really, about like moving on, really. They've got a lot of changes in... I think you see a lot of tendrils of modern cinema happening in the 50s. You start seeing those kind of studio systems breaking down at this point, even though they're still kind of prominent into the 60s, really. But like you start getting the like actors come through this period, which we'll still see in later films. Marlon Brando's huge, you know, Streetcar Named Desire, Wired One and stuff, like on the waterfront. Huge like change of cinema, like person to bring this method acting into cinemas in the 50s and stuff. So like but also you get the rise of film criticism, which is a big thing in the 50s, and you get then out of the French cinema magazine that's name's gone out of my head, you get auteur theory, and that's really the first moment in the 50s where people start.
Well, I was going to say in the
50s
feels like the decade where the director is very prominent in, because you know before directors were essentially showrunners, weren't they?
Yeah, they were, and people were just like the two biggest things in films are the screenwriter and the actors. You know, behind the screen, in front of the screen. That was the way people thought about films.
Or the producer, basically.
Yeah, and the producer.
We're going to make a picture.
Yeah, picture. And but yeah, you start getting people talk about auteur theory. There are a lot of people criticising this period, but because of the French New Wave stuff coming through, it was hard to argue with it. And then you started looking at the Howard Hawks, you know, and people like Hitchcock and stuff like that, and Ford started kind of pushing out this idea that auteur was a big thing, and we've never really left auteur theatre. So in a large ways, that's all where it starts in this period. So I think my point of my ramble is I'm quite excited to do 1950s films.
Yeah, same. So as you know, we're going to be talking about the film today. I was hoping to watch more of his films this week, but just work dictated that I couldn't, and especially some of them, they're quite lengthy. So
they can be. I was quite glad that this wasn't, because I was struggling to find
nice tight.
Yeah, nice tight. Yeah, I'm really happy with that. I do 8 minutes. That's perfect. So Kurosawa. That's who we're dealing with today. Kurosawa. Did I say it wrong? I'm going to say so many names wrong. Akira Kurosawa. Oh God. Just dub me over with someone who knows what they're talking about. I know nothing about Kurosawa. I've only ever seen Seven Samurai, and honestly, I didn't realise it was like 3.5 hours long, so I don't remember it at all. So I was saying the similar sort of thing, that I think I would like to do Ran later on in the 80s, when we do the 80s, to watch like a
that sounds good to me.
But it's undeniable he's one of the biggest names in cinema. I was going to say in Japanese cinema, but he's not in cinema, just worldwide. Just so incredibly influential. It's hard to actually kind of talk about him without struggling, because you could talk about him forever. But like his kind of filmmaking and the stuff that he did directly leads into stuff that we all love. Like Star Wars doesn't exist without him.
Was it Hidden Fortress? It's pretty
Hidden
much based
Fortress,
on, it's all told from the servant's point of view, and obviously, you know, it's meant to be that C-3PO and R2-D2 are telling that story, because they're the first characters you kind of
meet, and they argue in the same way that the two characters in Hidden Fortress argue with each other as well. Like it's no hidden. Like Steven Spielberg said the same thing about Kurosawa, to the point that Spielberg financed his last films when he came back to Hollywood in the 80s. Like,
I thought it was Lucas who helped finance Ran.
They probably both did, I'm going to guess.
Probably, yeah.
Sidney Lumet, he was a big push to get Kurosawa recognised in the 80s, the Academy and stuff like that. Like, there's no way to say that. It's hard to say that he wasn't like just a giant of cinema. This wasn't one of his earlier films, but do you know, like, he made a film a year, I think, almost every year from the 1950s and 60s or something. Like, his output is ridiculous. Like, almost a film a year all the way through to the 1950s and 60s, leading to. I was
going to say he's not quite as productive as Takeshi Mike, but yeah.
God, yeah. But in a long way, what's really fascinating about kind of Rashomon, the film we're talking about today, is that like Japan's just coming out of World War II, 1945. The film finished, the war finishes. No one is really knowing what's happening in Japan for those 5 years, and there's a lot of rumors about what they're doing and what like their art is. And then I think it was 1951 at the Venice Film Festival, they show Rashomon, which it didn't do well in Japan. It was a very unusual film for Japan, but people said it wasn't like the films coming out of Japan at the time, and it wasn't particularly well liked. So they didn't actually want to have it to represent Japan at the Venice Film Festival. But it was an absolute shocker. Like, American critics watched it at Venice in Japanese with Italian subtitles, and went home to write reviews about how amazing it was.
But like, it's one of those films that you can watch. I don't think you even need to read the dialogue. You can kind of get what's going on.
Yeah.
Because the way it's structured and the way it's put together, and like, you know, I can understand why at the time it was not controversial, but you know, it had 450 shots in the entire film, which today seems like, you know, nothing.
Yeah.
But back then, films then had 250 shots. Do you know what I mean?
Right,
it was a lot slow. It was like, this was a lot faster paced.
Right.
And even the music, I think the music doesn't sound
amazing.
it doesn't feel stereotypical Japanese kind of music. It feels very different, and
but it's presented like theatre as well, especially like the trial scenes. that the camera was
Oh,
just placed as you as a POV.
I mean,
like
yeah,
a
I mean, a
stage,
lot of
like-
films. I don't know if films have done that before, but yeah,
guess,
like
yeah,
you said,
but,
definitely
yeah.
like theatre. But the way they address the camera or talk to you as
Yeah, yeah.
because it's like a silent juror, isn't it? Or silent,
Yeah, that you never hear the
juror.
dialogue from the
Yeah.
court. Yeah. It's amazing, and like literally, this was just a phenomenon. In 1951, it got shown in Venice. It won the grand prize there, which is insane. People were just like, "What the fuck? Japan has cinema?" Like, which of course it did. It was one of the only film kind of industries in the world that hadn't been infected. That's probably the wrong word, by Hollywood. Like, Hollywood films didn't really play in Japan, so it had a really strong theatre like tradition and arts. And this was really the first time Japanese cinema left or made an impact outside of Japan. So for most people, this was the first Japanese cinema they'd ever seen, and just made Kurosawa just an absolute icon. And the actor as well, Mifune, is that how you pronounce his name?
Which one? Which character was he?
He plays the bandit.
Bandit, yeah.
He worked in almost every single Kurosawa film for this period. I think 15 of them or something like that. Like, but he ends up 16 film collaboration before they fell out. But they 150 feature films he acted in. He was like undeniably kind of Japan's most famous actor, and it just made him into celebrities. It just made him into huge celebrities. And this coming just after the war is kind of crazy. Like, those tensions were still there. Those guys' ideas were still there, just propping up. And for this to come out, I think is one of the big reasons why it kind of made such a crazy impact, really, that this existed. So there was just a rush to kind of then get Japanese films into kind of American cinemas because of this, which was quite funny because Rashomon didn't represent what Japan was making at the time, so they didn't get another kind of Rashomon come straight out, which they were kind of expecting.
I find it quite fascinating how this film came to be because I was watching. My DVD has a documentary on the making of Rashomon.
Cool.
And I have to admit, I didn't watch all of it because it was pretty much not a making of it. It was just like an interview with the cinematographer and the writer.
Okay.
But it's all badly subtitled, so my patience was wearing thin. But I watched enough of it. And the first interview was with I'm going to butcher his name, Shinobu Hashimoto, who's the writer.
Okay.
And so I think the way, I don't know how the systems work then or how they work now, whatever, but basically he was a writer and he was obviously working for a company. I think it was like Toho or something like that.
Okay.
And so he was submitting his scripts, and the person who he worked for actually died.
Okay.
And so he submitted a load of other scripts to another guy, and he was like, "Oh, all your stuff that you write is fiction. It's your own work. Have you ever thought about adapting anything?"
Right.
And so he was like, "No, I'm not really interested in adapting work. I'm more interested in creating my own stories." But then apparently, like, this kind of buried in his head, and he was like thinking, "Oh, what? Maybe I should adapt something. It might be a good."
A good challenge or something.
Good challenge, yeah. So he got a load of books, and so the one of them was In the Grove.
Yes.
And it took him 3 days to write it into a film, and apparently it was 88 pages, which, I mean, if you look at it now, it's an 88 minutes thing, but he said apparently at that time it was too short. Apparently, if they were to have shot that screenplay, it would have only been like an hour.
Okay.
But somehow it basically ended up in the hands of Akira Kurosawa, and he wants to make it, basically. But he said, look, we need to expand upon it and kind of, develop it a bit further. But he was actually quite ill, the writer. I mean, he lived to 100 years old, so he lived beyond this. But he had like a really bad back, and he couldn't, he was bedridden for a while.
Okay.
So Akira Kurosawa actually finished writing the screenplay.
Right.
But this guy, he actually wrote most of Akira Kurosawa's biggest films. So he wrote Seventh Samurai, and
Sure.
he worked on Hidden Fortress as well, and Ikaru and Throne of Blood.
Yeah, there's a thing
that.
with Kurosawa. They call it Kurosawa Gummy, I think it's called. And basically, he had lots of team of people that he always worked with. So the composer, I don't want to try these names because I'm an idiot. Fumio Hayazaka. He basically composed a ton of Kurosawa films. He composed this. Cinematographers. The cinematographer from this did Yojimbo as well. That's Kazuo Miyawaga. I'm doing that wrong. The art department basically did every single one of his films. So like the same art department of Yoshiro Muraki, I think, did like all of their films. The production crew were always the same people. And the actors as well were regularly in most of them. The actor Tashimi Shimura, who plays the woodcutter in this, was in 21 of Kurosawa's films. So like there was this kind of element that he had his team behind him, and this kind of, you could tell a Kurosawa film, which is really odd with this film because it's not like his other films. His other films have like stylistic things and almost like reoccurring themes, which don't actually exist in this one. There isn't really that master-disciple stuff that you get with the kind of relationships of samurais and stuff like that. There isn't really that heroic champion stuff that you see in a lot of his samurai films that was either. And you do get kind of elements of like the atmosphere and weather and stuff like that, which is a big thing in his films in this. But really, this film isn't really a good example of his films. It's very different to it, and it's almost what makes it really special for me. I mean, I have to watch his other films, I do admit that, but you can definitely sense something really, really great about this film. It grabs an idea and just portrays it, like it just absolutely goes for it in a way that I was really impressed by. And you say 88 minutes, it just gets to the point, like it knows what it's doing and gets to the point about it. And I don't know if I say we're doing this week's film. We're doing Rashomon. I don't even know if I said that, but yeah, play the trailer, I guess.
私は世にも恐ろしい地獄を見た。盗賊、美女、死霊、そしてソマウリ、4つの口が物語る4つの地獄の声を聞かされた。まさにこれは心のジャングルの藪の中の物語。ギラギラと光る重翼の目が。
中落外にその名を知られたこの多条丸が。
でもそんな目で私を見るのはあんまりです。
時平安の末、真夏の藪の中、炎と燃え上がる男女愛欲の大絵巻、死闘、格闘、激闘、息詰まる男と男の決闘、平然と嘲笑う幼鳥たる美女、神か魔か、荒廃の都の一角、人間の喜怒哀楽を風とともにそびえて聞いた大羅城門。
As I say, I know what a Rashomon is because of like cartoons. Like I know what a Rashomon episode is in cartoons. There's a really famous episode of Batman, the animated series, called Point of View, which is just this. It's different cops telling you about the same encounter with Batman, all from their different like elements and stuff like that. There's a bloody episode of King of the Hill that I remember, which is a Rashomon episode where they're all firefighters. There's an episode of SpongeBob I remember where it's about the secret formula to Krabby Patties, I think, which is a Rashomon episode. And I believe I think there's a Johnny Bravo episode that was called it's called something like Rashomon or something.
That sounds about right.
Yeah, and just this whole thing, it's just because of this film, the amount of times this has been just used as like a literary technique or film technique now is just incredible. And there's other films like that. There's TV shows and stuff, and it's kind of incredible, really. And it's for me, it's lovely getting to watch like the original. Actually, I really, really enjoyed it. I figured like when this opens, it opens with like proper 50s credits. I forgot credits are now at the start of the film, which is which I don't know when that switch happened.
But I love the way the cinematography looks with the white Japanese text.
Like
it
it's
looks
scorched into the film almost.
It looks perfect. Like you know, if you have like, I think there's just something about Japanese text and the way it's handwritten and it's a bit scratchy and that it just looks cool already. Do you know what I mean? Straight away. And you know, like how much rain is like pouring down.
Yeah.
Apparently, they had to put black dye in the rain so it would show up on the screen.
No way. Yeah,
because the way they use light in this film, because the whites are very white, so they had to use mirrors and that to kind of like bounce light off and stuff. So it was like it felt very bright. Because they wanted to use, because there's different theories about the light in this. Like
sure.
Like there's some people say the bright light sometimes means dishonesty or something like that, or the bright light means the truth, and then the darkness is the evil. Yeah. Like so there's just conflicting reports on that, but like there are definite, like, not to get ahead, but there's definite shots, especially of the woman, that the light is very bright on her, and I don't know, as the film goes on, it becomes less bright on her.
Huh. That's amazing. I did notice, like I watching this, I noticed like the cinematography of the light was just it was noticeable. Like if you know what I mean, like the kind of sometimes there was quite a kind of soft, almost blurry element to the screen, not blurred, but like a kind of a soft element to it.
Yeah, a bit of a glow to it. Yeah,
which I was considering flashback. Maybe they were using that as like a memory indicator or something. But a lot of the stuff is shot like behind leaves of trees and stuff like that. Almost like kind of the truth is shaded from you or something like that. Mm-hmm. Which, you know, I just liked everything watching about this film. But like,
so yeah, we find out that Rashomon is it's like a city. It's like the sign we see. It's like a city gate, isn't it? Basically.
Yeah, basically, with an old kind of city gate. It's all crumbling around them and stuff.
Because as we said, the book was called In a Grove.
I think there's another book called Rashomon, so we took the title from that book.
Right. Okay.
And took the plot from In a Grove. I think it's the same writer though. I think that's right. I thought it was really interesting that he set it at a gate, especially because it's an ancient city gate and it's now in ruins, and that's kind of symbolizing that what they're getting at is this decay of kind of morals and culture in Japan. Which
but also, don't forget, it's probably a budgetary thing as well.
Yeah, probably.
They only have like what, 3 locations. So you have,
only 3 locations.
You have the gates, you have the woods, and then you have where they have the trial.
Sure, but then,
and I think you have like 6 or 7 cast members, and that's about it.
I mean, he easily could have set the after the court thing sitting on the steps of the courthouse or whatever, you know, sitting outside.
Yeah, true. Yeah, definitely, for sure.
And
it looks amazing though. Don't get me wrong. It's so imposing, and it's like. So you first meet the woodcutter and then the priest. Who's the other guy? What's he do? He's
just like a commoner. Yeah,
but, like I love how he tears it apart. He's tearing apart the
to
set
make fire.
To make fire.
Wonderful. That to me was really theatrical.
Yeah, definitely.
Like you can see that happening on stage. Maybe not the fire, but but yeah, like I'd say what this. I thought it was interesting it was at a gate, which is the dividing line between different zones of authority. I think a lot about borders at the moment because of my PhD. So, like, I think of, like, that as, it's like borders are like liminal spaces. They don't really exist as, like, certain things. They're just, they're almost like places in between 2 places. And I thought that was kind of interesting because it's almost like borders and gates like that are places where narratives meet. Like a narrative of one city-state versus another, where traders meet, stories meet. I thought that was really good for a setting of a place where we're talking about an unreliable narrator, which I thought that was. I thought that was thematic. I have to assume that was purposeful, but at least it fit in the way I was watching the film. But I think it's really interesting. Like, some people have said this. I don't know if this is the first film ever to do unreliable narrator. I'm assuming it isn't, but like audiences in 1950 probably had little reason not to trust the narrator of a film, and this must have seemed really just big that this film, one, you can't trust anything that you're seeing on screen to be the truth, and 2, doesn't tell you what the truth is. Which I think is really revolutionary, I think, at the time, surely, for the filmmaking.
Oh, yeah.
But anyway, back to back to the plot. So yeah, like, you get like the priest and the woodcutter hiding from the rain, and the other man runs in. They're baffled by a strange story they just overheard about a murder. And
well, we find out that the woodcutter was he was the one who found.
Yeah, I love that. I love that bit. So like it cuts to a first story which you see, which is the woodcutter telling him how he found a body in the forest a couple of days ago, a body of a samurai, and he's walking through this forest, and I thought the camera was so sweeping here and like so fluid that it was just felt really modern to me.
But it had shots like which you wouldn't expect in a film like that, like even just shots of looking up into the trees, and it's like moving forward, or tracking shots and things like that, which I thought were. You know, it's obviously they're shots that we've seen 100 million times now, but you just didn't expect it to see it in a film.
No,
from 1950, I guess.
Not at all. And I know there were certain things to look out for Kurosawa. I know that about him. I know they do it right at the beginning. There's something called an axial cut, I believe the term is. You're the filmmaker.
Okay.
But like basically, it's zooming in on something, but it's creating a zoom by placing the camera in different places. So it's actually physically moving the camera forward each time and cutting to each shot.
Well, yeah, that was definitely one of the techniques that he was using. Like, so that's what they were saying. How there was like, so yeah, there's 407 separate shots in the whole film, but sometimes they're like tricks.
Yeah,
like, you feel like it's one shot, but it's actually several shots that are kind of spliced together. It's very clever.
Very clever. I noticed it as soon as it opened. It does it on the gate. It goes doosh and cuts forward into the gate rather than zooming in. It's just quite impactful.
I mean, we probably call those like smash cuts now, or like crash, not a crash zoom, but like you know what I mean, like a.
But talking about the woodsman through the forest, and when it cuts to like the point of view of the corpse with like the hands in the air, I just thought that was
do you know
wonderful.
What it reminded me of? It reminded me of The Thing, where you see the corpse of the Thing monster, and they're like looking down at it. It's like these hands like looking up. It kind of reminds me of that. That
is exactly the same, actually. Yeah. He also finds different things before he finds the body. He finds a woman's hat. He finds a samurai's cap. He finds some cut rope and an amulet, and then he finds the body of the samurai. And then the priest explains that he saw the same samurai traveling with his wife the same day. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so that's the setup. Then they show them in court. So they're addressing like these unseen kind of what you call it, like administrators or judges or something, and they're explaining that to him. And then another witness appears with this bandit. They call him like a notorious bandit. His name is Takumaru, maybe. Takumaru, I think. Yeah. Played by Mifune. Who was found with the samurai's bow and arrows. He seemingly they thought he'd been thrown from the horse, and he was injured himself. But he corrects him and says, "No, I wasn't."
Yeah, he's like laughing. No, how you think I was thrown from the horse?
And he says that actually, no, he drank from a spring, and there must have been a poison snake in it because he had an upset stomach. So I wasn't thrown from the horse. I was relieving myself.
So when you see the story from his point of view, it only when we see the wife and the samurai's point of view, it's like halfway through the story, isn't it? Pretty much. So it always gets up to the rape, doesn't it? And then, so it always carries on from the rape, doesn't it? I think.
Yes.
So the rape and then the fight scene, and then but the pre bits of that is you assume is meant to be the same.
Yes. So yeah, the stories only diverge after the attack on her. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like yeah. You're right. So everything. So he explains that basically he was lounging around in the woods, saw this samurai, didn't care about him until he noticed his wife, and she was the most beautiful person she'd ever seen, and had to have her. Yeah. Do you see that his sword fucking goes erect in that shot?
Yeah, I know.
So yeah, he decides he's going to have to capture the wife, even if it means killing the samurai. So he tricks the samurai with a promise of some old swords.
It's a pretty lame trick. I'm sure he could have just done what he wanted to do anyway without, like...
I was thinking, I wonder if, like, in the time period it's set in, like, whatever, 10th century or whatever, Japan, samurais were quite like respected members of communities. So I wondered if people did come up to them a lot and say like, "Look, you've got a lot of money. I've got some swords. Please buy them off me," kind of stuff. I wonder if that would be like relatively normal, because I've got no reason for the samurai to go with him. Just like, you'd be like, "Fuck you! I'm just going this way. Go away." Like, so
anyway, he's very intrigued, and he follows him, doesn't he?
Yeah. Which I just love. I love this. Like apparently, the acting in this, like, it's not naturalistic. It really isn't. Even though I think some of the performances have a weird amount of naturalistic acting in it.
Yeah.
But it's not trying to be. It's meant to be enhanced. It's meant to be really big. It's meant to be really theatrical. Apparently Kurosawa had them watching nature documentaries because he wanted the physicality of each character to be based on different animals. So you had like, you know, lions and panthers stalking stuff and things, and you see that in the kind of performance of all the actors. Like Mifune's really doing this really wild, like almost like a primate or something, kind of leaping around all the time and like growling and laughing and throwing his arms about and stuff like that. He's doing these really big performances, and then you get people like the medium later on, who's doing all this really like primal acting and crawling around.
That was my favourite part of the film, I think.
I thought it was amazing. Me too. Yeah. And
but like apparently they all live together. The whole cast and crew live together.
Wow.
And so like Kurosawa said that like making Rashomon was pretty much like a 24/7 night and day thing. Yeah. So they were always together, like very tight knit community when they were making this film.
I don't know how they do that without falling out, frankly. But, so yeah, he tricks the samurai. They end up having a do they have a fight now?
No, I don't think you see it. Like a lot of the violence is like kind of is cut, but I think he just basically you just see him laughing and he's like ha, because he's like, you find, I don't think he's tied him to a tree, but he says later on.
He cuts later, yeah. There's a bit where I just loved Mifune in this. There's a bit where he's checking out the sword. I just remember I saw it in my notes. He's like, the samurai's checking out the sword and getting intrigued, and it's not looking at the samurai, it's looking at the bandit Mifune, and he's doing this proper like chin scratching acting, like and getting like, he's almost like you can feel the energy in him about to pop because he's so excited that he's like his trick is going to work and stuff like that. I just loved it. Like he was he's
obviously so happy that he's caught a samurai, and he's kind of
like,
so you don't see him do it, I don't think, and then he starts watching his wife, like kind of spying on her, but she notices. He comes down and goes, your husband has just fallen ill.
Yeah.
At the top of it. Come with me. It's so weird how the way you could have just left him there. Why he had to show her that.
Oh, because he says, doesn't it? It's all about this thing about dishonor. So he takes her there just to dishonor him. Like, and just to show
your husband is useless.
Yeah. Like, and I'm the best kind of thing. Like, then she attacks him with a dagger. This very innate kind of beautiful kind of inlaid dagger, but she's kind of very soon overpowered. He's just kind of taunting her, really, even though she's got a lot of kind of spunk, I would say. But like he quickly just kind of overpowers her, and then this is kind of, that's where the narrative kind of changes, really, because his story then, he says he kisses her, she is immediately seduced by her, and then it kind of cuts away, really. What I respected about this film, which I think the 1970s can learn from, is they didn't have to show anything. Like,
well, yeah, you never see any blades going into anyone, or like any like.
They definitely don't show any of the kind of sexual assault on screen.
No, they don't. Well, I mean, they probably, censorship, especially back then, wouldn't have allowed anything anyway. But
it didn't harm it. I wasn't there going, oh, come on.
But then when we watched this, and as soon as she becomes disarmed, I was like, oh no, it's this straw drugs all over again.
yeah. But it works in this because it's.
Well, I didn't realise at this point we were going to be seeing different points of view of the same.
Yeah. So by his story, he kisses her. She is immediately seduced by him, absolutely overwhelmed by him. And then, as he is about to leave, she begs the bandit to kill. It's kind of weird, I think, but she begs him to kill himself or her husband because, like, this has been so shameful to her. She can't have two people knowing her shame. She has to only have one person knowing her shame. So the bandit decides that like he will let the samurai free, and they will have an honourable duel to see who wins the wife, because that's what women are for. And the bandit explains that they had an amazing fight, and the samurai was a great swordsman, but eventually
normally they don't clash more than 20 times.
Yeah, was it
23 times with their swords or something?
Yeah, we clashed 24 times or something, and normally people don't get anywhere near 20 or something, which I just thought was great. And he says he won. I love the fight scene. It wasn't especially. I think there's a product in.
It's more scrappy.
Yeah, scrappy.
It's not.
Yeah,
but it's not. Well, especially because the what's his my mind's gone dead. Hang on. The bandit. He's definitely more scrappy in the way that he fights. Obviously, the samurai's got more. He's more posed.
Yeah.
But how do you fight someone who's scrappy though? You kind of, unless you're two samurais, or it's very kind of the stoic kind of, I don't know.
Like that, yeah. There's proper rules and gentleman fighting and everything.
Whereas the bandit, he'll do whatever he needs to do.
Yeah. I was going to say actually about the wife fighting with the dagger. It was really I can't remember the character name, but there's a character in what's it called? Soul Calibur. That fights with like her, like really fluid motions and the way spinning around and kind of letting her dress kind of like disguise her arm movements and stuff. It just reminds me of a character in it.
Well, I know it's Chinese, but obviously your Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon kind of things do that kind of
sure,
kind of
Wushu,
lunge movements and things like that kind of. But I know it's very different. I know Brandon will probably like be.
Well, yeah,
cursing at me for mentioning Chinese films with a Japanese film. Because I know he likes both, but
you shouldn't confuse them.
You shouldn't confuse the two, yeah.
But yes, so he kills the samurai, and in the middle of the fight, the wife runs away. He makes a point to say that the dagger the wife had she dropped it. And they ask him like, well, why didn't you take a dagger home? And he goes, oh, I'm such an idiot. Yeah, that's worth so much money. I should have taken it. I'm like, I'm so stupid. And that's kind of the end of his testimony then, really. And then, so like, wipe cut back to Rashomon. And like, this is a big thing, apparently. I like, apparently wipes like as a cut, they were really big in like silent cinema era. But really, to use a wipe in 1950 was really antiquated. It was really silly.
It was old-fashioned. It's like using a star wipe now.
Yeah. But like, and it's kind of funny to me because wipes I know from Star Wars, and they exist because of Kurosawa.
Oh
they
yeah,
exist
because
he was 100%
Lucas, taking it from.
It was like I love this thing. Like, so yeah, wipe cut, which I think in Rashomon they do serve a purpose. They're kind of they're marking kind of different narratives. Like when the wipes come in, they're showing you that there's a different narrative coming in, or they're using it as like almost like ellipses to say that we're moving to a different kind of like flashback or temporal zone or stuff like that. They do play a role here. They're not just for no reason. But I think it's kind of cool using them, and would have seemed quite antiquated, I think, at the time. We cut back to Rashomon, and the commoner says that story makes perfect sense. He knows this bandit. But he wonders what happened to the wife, and the priest explains that the wife turns up at court, and whilst the woodcutter's there, still going, none of this makes sense, and they're all lying and stuff. And I thought the commoner has some really good lines here that I really liked. He goes, he says it's human to lie. Most of the time, we cannot be honest with ourselves, which I thought was a really good line. So the wife is in court now, and the first kind of element of this unreliable narrator comes in now, because the bandit described the wife as like fearless and kind of stoic all the time, but in court she's not the woman that the bandit described at all. She's
much more emotional.
Yeah, she's struggling to keep herself together and crying a lot and stuff. So she explains that after the bandit raped her, he runs off and left them. She composes herself eventually and unties her husband, but the samurai just reacts
Just
coldly
keeps
to her.
staring. He just keeps staring down at her, and she's like, please do anything, but don't look at me like that.
Yeah, he looks at her just like trash, like she's spoiled goods or whatever, like.
Yeah, well, he pretty much says that, doesn't he? I think.
I think so.
Much.
Yeah. Just loathing, like a look of loathing. I think she says. She can't handle this look from her husband, so just like begs him to kill her, so she can just be at peace. But he just doesn't even react. He doesn't move or anything like that. He's not going to give her that satisfaction or anything like that. I loved the music at this point. It was you had this slow building of tension. It was getting like slowly quicker and almost a bit loud, I think, maybe as well, like just kind of like making like driving that kind of emotional tension up.
The one thing I just want to point out, like we were talking about the sword fight, you don't hear the clashing of swords at all. You don't hear
That's
any
true.
of the noises you don't hear any sound effects or foley from the sword.
Yeah.
So that's why I was saying it's kind of very like silent film, like it's very
you're right.
minimalistic in the sound design, and I'm sure that was on purpose.
I'm sure maybe it's something to do with it being someone telling a story. Like when you tell a story, you don't go cling, clang, clink or something. Like, so maybe that's an element to that. But yeah, so she can't handle this loathing look or whatever, and she faints with the dagger in her hand. Yeah, that's right.
Well, apparently, sorry, they lost some audio on set. Apparently.
Oh, really?
Yeah, apparently. So some of it had to be
Some of it's
ADR. and
ADR?
stuff.
I didn't know it was in the ADR. But so she faints with the dagger in her hand, and when she wakes up, her husband's dead, and the dagger's in her chest, and stuck in his chest. She says that she runs away and tries to kill herself by jumping into a lake, but failed. And that's, again, wipe, and we cut back to Rashomon again.
Oh, hang on. Sorry, I found something else about the sound. Sorry, it's interesting me.
Talking to myself.
Kurosawa felt that the sound cinema multiplies the complexity of a film. Cinematic sound is never merely a complement, never merely what the sound machine caught while you took the scene. Real sound does not merely add to the image, it multiplies it. Regarding Rashomon, Kurosawa said, "I like the silent pictures and always have. I wanted to restore some of this beauty and thought of it, and I remember in this way. One of the techniques of modern art is simplification, and that is, I must therefore simplify this film." So yeah, the sound was simplified on purpose.
Yeah. That's awesome.
So yeah. Sorry, continue.
It's fine. No, that was really interesting to say sorry. You should drop in with stuff like that. So we're basically cut back to Rashomon now, when the commoner, he's decided that the woman's lying because she's a woman. And he basically says, like, when women cry, they lie. So because she was crying, he decides that she must be lying about everything. The priest then explains that there's a third story they have,
this is when I was watching it, I was thinking, how are they going to do? They're obviously doing everyone's story, and there's only 3 people in the story. Are they going to have the dead samurai? And then they did it. I was like, that's awesome.
I thought it was awesome. I felt skeptical when I realised it was going to be like the voice of the dead kind of thing. But this medium is awesome. Like,
well, obviously it's the male voice on. She's like lip syncing to a male voice, or vice versa. But
it's so creepy.
Great.
Yeah,
and I think some of the picture is degraded, like just through I don't know 70 years of cinema. Like, but I think it added to it the fact that the footage was like a bit more fucked up. It kind of really helped. Like, it was a lot darker, and I thought it was really good.
Yeah, her face is kind of covered by a veil, and the way she moves,
the way she spins around on her hand and stuff, and it's just fantastic.
It is,
and like there's a cut later on, like when he commits suicide, the way it cuts then to her falling to the ground is amazing.
And like, there's something for me in the fact that we were seeing a kind of medium in the Japanese sense, and not like the way I normally see it in portrayed in Western films. was creepier to me. Like, I loved the staff and the bells. I loved the kind of incense. I loved the costumes, the veil, the way she was moving and stuff. It was a lot more full-bodied of a performance.
Well, ours is a woman in a wagon with a flipping crystal ball going on.
Yeah. Or it's like it's like an old lady sitting in a chair with their hands on the table, just like throwing their head back and forth, and some wind blows in the background. But this was like a full-bodied performance. It was like,
but this is going back
like
to that,
dance.
the way you were saying she fights with the dagger. It's that kind of, but not done in that kind of elegant way. It's done in a more kind of like
a feral
visceral
way.
Yeah,
like,
feral kind of.
Yeah. I thought she was brilliant. Noriko Honma, I believe her name is, but I thought she was brilliant. And as you say, like, dubbing his voice over her, it didn't. I mean, obviously it was ADR, but like, it almost felt like it was coming from her somehow. Like, it was just really well done, and the lip syncing just worked somehow really, really well. It was just it's a silly moment in a script which could easily not work, but the way he shot it and it was performed was just wonderful. Like, so the samurai tells his own story then. He claims that after raping his wife, the bandit asks her to travel with him, and she accepted, and asks the bandit to kill the samurai so she doesn't belong to two men or something. Like,
but the bandit doesn't kill him. He just lets him go, doesn't he? Cut him open.
He's so shocked by this request, he kind of sees the wife in like a different way. So instead, he grabs the wife and chucks her to the ground and to ask the samurai, like, what shall I do with her? Like, this, this is such a shocking thing for someone to ask me to do. What shall I do with her? He decides at that point he's going to pardon the bandit for all his crimes, which is nice of him. While he's letting the samurai go, she runs away then, and he chases after her, and the samurai says, I could have been sitting there for hours, but sometimes later he came back and let me go. And when the bandit disappears, he takes his wife's dagger and kills himself with it. And then it cuts back to the medium, and she says that sometime later someone else removed the dagger from my body. Yeah. Or something. And at this point, it's just, you've got these three stories. None of them match up with each other. Like, they're all different kind of elements to them. They all have different kind of like sensibilities. They portray people better in different ways or worse in different ways. And it cuts back to Rashomon, and these people are kind of going mad at each other, basically. The woodcutter especially is convinced that all of them are lying. Like, and he reveals.
Don't you think there's one moment though? Where the common man looks at there's a moment where the common man looks at the priest after the woodsman guy, the woodcutter, is telling the story, and he kind of looks at him and rolls his eyes like, I think he's lying, or I'm thinking he's. There's a moment earlier on. It's not. It's before they kind of find out that he obviously saw something. Yeah. But there's definitely a moment there, I think.
And I like the way the commoner the priest keeps trying to talk, and the commoner's like, I don't need a sermon. Shut up. Like, just let me hear a story. It's raining. It's cold. Let me just hear a story. Tell me what happened. Like, so. The woodcutter reveals that he knows the samurai wasn't killed by dagger. He knows the samurai was killed by a sword. And the reason he knows this, because he watched it happen. Like, the story that he told you earlier of him finding this stuff in the woods was a lie. He did come across the hat. He did come across, like, the stuff. But at the end of it, he saw the rape, I believe, is what he basically says.
If I remember, though, you don't actually see him in any of these shots, though, do you?
No, you don't. I was actually looking out for him just in case they put him in. Yeah. So he reveals to what he believes is the object truth of the matter. He says that
it's kind of a mixture of all three, really, though, isn't it?
Kind of is, yeah. So he says after the rape, it's the bandit who's begging the wife to marry him, or he'll kill her. Instead, she kind of runs over and releases the samurai, cuts the ropes.
Yeah, but then he rejects her.
Yeah, the samurai says that he won't fight for her because she's a shameless whore. Is exactly what the subtitle said. So instead, she kind of loses her mind. She kind of goes mad, and she kind of starts criticizing both of them, like criticizing their manhood, criticizing their their masculinity, and saying that how dare they not be man enough to fight each other or fight for a woman and stuff like that. I thought she was great here. She was similar sort of the medium. She's kind of switching back and forth for different emotions and glee and crying and she gets properly into like the villain mode. She's really portrayed as a villain here, I think. Well,
because she's kind of egging them on, isn't she?
Yeah.
Basically,
and kind of hiding when as soon as they start clashing, she screams and runs away and cries and stuff like that. She's got all this kind of emotion pent up. But yeah, they end up fighting. They do duel, but in the woodcutters one, it's crap. They're awful. Like they're very fearful of each other. They're shaking. Their swords are shaking. They're slipping all over the place. They're falling over. It's not like kind of anything to be celebratory about.
Sword gets driven into the ground. He can't get it out, so he's kind of just. And then the samurai gets wedged in a tree. Yeah,
gets wedged in the tree. It's almost like the bandit wins almost by luck, really.
It's by accident, not by accident, but yeah, it's definitely
like the sword kind of gets trapped in the stump, and then the bandits manage to get his sword back, and he kind of chases down the samurai a little bit where the samurai's stuck on the ground and just kind of chucks the sword at him. Oh, really?
Pretty much, yeah.
It's what I loved about this fight, like you were saying, it's completely silent. It's like maddening. It's so silent. Like there's no music and there's just them kind of like the sound of their feet on like the kind of grass or the dirt, and them kind of like breathing and panicking a bit, like. And so yeah, once the bandit kills the samurai, the wife has already fled. But instead of chasing her, he just takes the samurai swords and the arrows and stuff like that and just leaves, like limps away, really.
And that's why he falls off the horse, I guess, because
he's injured. Yeah, I think, yeah.
And also probably the horse may be rejecting him because
he's just a bandit, just a wily bandit.
Well, like because horses, like my dad's got a horse, and if someone goes in the field that my horse doesn't know or recognise, he goes fucking apeshit.
Yeah.
So yeah, if you're be jumping on someone like someone's horse that. Someone else's horse, then just be prepared that it's probably going to throw you off or be very temperamental.
Well, that doesn't match to every Western I've ever seen. Like you're meant to jump off the inn roof onto a horse, onto any waiting horse. So then back to Rashomon. They start debating which story is most believable, really. But they're interrupted by the sound of a crying baby.
Yep.
The commoner, instead of helping the baby, just steals the kimono. Like the baby's wrapped in this kimono. It's got like an amulet, like an expensive amulet as well. And the commoner just steals the kimono and the amulet. The woodcutters kind of starts chastising him about this. But like the commoner pushes back, saying that like, look, in this world, if you're not selfish, you're dead. Like you got to look after for yourself, kind of thing. And at that point, the commoner realizes that the woodcutter didn't tell anyone that he'd seen the incident in the woods because he was the one who stole the wife's expensive dagger. And that's what happened to it. And so he kind of chastised him, saying that, like, you're just a bandit calling another bandit a bandit. Like, how dare you, kind of thing. And it's quite clear that the woodcutter doesn't deny this. The woodcutter stole the dagger. That's one of the truths of this whole story, I think. But he doesn't show you that. You could still argue that's not true, but the woodcutter does seem to kind of... That does shake, like, the woodcutter. The priest kind of, like, just falls apart now. Like, he just claims...
Well, yeah, because his faith in man is kind of been...
It's shot.
Tested. Now it's shot because the one person who he thought who was with him that he could trust, he can't trust him.
He can't, and he's just watched... this horrible murder happened... There's definitely
and now found out a baby's been abandoned by the parents. So that's another thing.
And and none of the stories make sense. Everybody's lying. Not like no one is telling the truth here. Like everyone is lying to some degree. Even the woodcutter's lying at this point. Like it was presented like he was finally going to tell the truth of what happened, but with the revelation that he stole the dagger, what you have to think then is look back at his story and think,
what's different? Yeah,
what's different here? Why would he portray the wife as so evil? Maybe it's something to do with the fact that he stole her dagger, and so he would want to portray her as evil because that means his theft is more honourable or something. Like you can't trust any of the
they
stories,
basically say that men lie to themselves, like that. So they were saying that people lie to themselves so much that they convince themselves it's the truth.
Yeah, exactly, which is a great line. Yeah,
and if he does that, if he puts the woman in a bad light, he can convince himself, well, I was justified in.
Yeah, it's justified. Look how horrible she is. She doesn't deserve that. Yeah, absolutely. So, like, you're left at this point. None of the stories are true, or none of them you can believe or know what happened, which is wonderful, really. So, like, then what happens, which was kind of cool. The woodcutter then reaches for the baby, and the priest is like, "No, you don't get the baby." Like, but the woodcutter's like, "No,
I've got 6 kids.
Yeah, I've got
one more
6
won't
kids
help.
already. What's one more?" I was thinking quite a lot, frankly, but this kind of revelation that the woodcutter is a good man, or at least wants to try and be a good person, puts like that theft of the dagger in like a new kind of light in the priest's head, really. And so the priest gives the baby to the woodcutter, and says that maybe there is hope for humanity yet. I think that's kind of one of his last lines, really. And it really just at that point it stopped raining. A bit more sun coming through. Like
I think it's just basically to show there's a bit there is light.
Bit of light,
in it.
yeah. And the woodcutter just walks home with the baby, and that's the end. And because
I think originally
it just finishes.
I think originally I read that he wanted it to be overcast just to show there is the possibility of shit going back south again. But but apparently when they filmed it, they couldn't. It wasn't the right kind of
right kind of weather.
The sky wasn't they just had to deal with what they had.
So was all this recorded outside in location? Was all this location shot? Do you know?
I believe it may have been a set for the where the trial was.
Oh yeah, okay. I think the gate was built for it. I think, like on location, which is quite remarkable.
Yeah. But if you think about it, they probably the gate itself is it's like one panel that they can kind of flip around and go to the back of it. And you've got a back of it, and they probably build one set that they can like utilize in different shots and stuff.
Yeah.
But apparently, like with the filming, there was like there's quite an experimental like approach to the piece. So they'd have like a series of single close-ups of the bandit and the wife and the husband, and they'd keep repeating these 3 shots over and over again to kind of emphasize like this triangular relationship between them, and like the length of times of shots of the wife, the bandit, and the samurai with the same length.
Right.
Things like that. Quite interesting.
Huh. I know that the film wasn't especially well received in Japan. I think I mentioned that earlier. Like, and when this film started just being the biggest film in the world in the West, they were quite critical of it. They were basically saying it's because it's the most Western of Japanese films. That's why. That's the only reason they like it. Or, but I think Kurosawa basically said, "This is just what Japanese people do. We're so good at criticizing Japanese things." Like that was his kind of like way of thinking about it.
But like I said, I think one of the reasons why it was so successful is because you could watch it without reading the dialogue, and you can pretty much kind of guess what's going on. The music isn't necessarily overly Japanese. I don't know how that sounds horrible to say, but it's not like it's not cliche,
Yeah, I know. Yeah,
especially at that time.
And like they're very simple archetypes of the characters. You got the kind of honourable man, or at least his position in society is. You got the bandit, and you got like the beautiful wife. And it does, through watching it, you start thinking stuff like, how are these ever a married couple? If any of these stories are slightly true, like how would they were a couple at all? Like, and it does start making you question everything you think about these archetypes. The honourable man isn't very honourable. The wife isn't very devoted. The bandit might not be that evil. He, in one of the storytelling, he's quite fearful and scrappy. Really, he's just a man like trying to survive.
And And later on, he's talking to the wife, and he's basically saying, "Look, I'll become an honourable person.
Yeah. I'll do anything you want.
I'll stop doing what I'm doing, and I'll do whatever you want me to do. I'll sell things on the streets just to kind of, It's that's all said after what he's done, though. Do you know what I mean? So.
No. It's not to say that he's a great person. I just mean it makes each character complicated. It does shine different lights on each of these characters, which works. I mean, it absolutely works. There's a reason why this, we said the Rashomon effect earlier. The idea that witness testimony can't be relied upon is called the Rashomon effect because of this. It's the thing about that. The idea that objective truth exists is a lie, because truth doesn't exist. Truth is just about what you see and what you think. It's smart as fuck.
Yeah, I mean, what would you give it then out of 5 then if you were to?
Mine was an easy 5. It was
hands down. It's just almost flawless, really.
Yeah, it is. It is, and because the running
to talk
time
about
as
a film doing exactly what it's supposed to do and hitting all the right cylinders, it's a film that's firing on all cylinders. Do you know what I mean? And cinematography, music, and you could probably say the acting's a bit questionable, but it works for what it's.
I think
it's doing.
Absolutely works. I think a more naturalistic performance of this wouldn't be as fun to watch.
Yeah.
I think the whole kind of the performances feel like they're a story being told. They feel like you're watching something that's been written, because they're all about flashbacks. They're all about someone writing a story, telling you a story. So the performances match that energy to it, really, rather than them just being this kind of, or rather than it just trying to show as natural or something. It does feel theatrical, and I think that works for the narrative. I have a quote from Kurosawa about the film, which I thought was really cool. So I think I'll read that. He says, "Human beings are unable to be honest with themselves about themselves. They cannot talk about themselves without embellishing. This script portrays such human beings, the kind who cannot survive without lies to make themselves feel like they are better people than they really are. You say that you can't understand this script at all, but that is because the human heart itself is impossible to understand." And I thought that is a brilliant quote. That sums up everything so perfectly.
Yeah, definitely.
And I'm really excited because this is a guy that I've known the name of forever. I can't say it, but I know the name of, and I've known of this film forever. So this was wonderful just watching this. I'm not gonna beat myself up for not watching it before. I should have, but it's wonderful to see it now.
What we talking about next week?
Ooh, good question. We are doing. I think, and this is shameful if true, I think this is our first British film we're covering next week. Would that be right? Might be.
I guess you could say that Straw Dogs is a British film.
I guess so. American filmmaker, though. What about Remains of the Day? Can that be a British film?
Well, I don't know. It's an Indian film production company, isn't
it? Anyway.
Isn't it? I don't know. Anyway.
Yeah, so we're doing an Ealing comedy, which, I'm really excited about doing an Ealing comedy.
I've only seen The Man in the White Suit.
So yeah, The Man in the White Suit with Alex Guinness. And
old Obi-Wan Kenobi.
Yeah, apparently every single film we do is connected to Star Wars. But yeah, I'm really excited to watch. I'm really excited to see Alex Guinness in his prime. If you've ever seen The Lady Killers, it's wonderful. So these a big element of British cinema, and next week will be The Man in the White Suit.
Awesome, can't wait. Right, thanks for listening. Don't forget to review and subscribe on all different social medias and on various ways you can get podcasts over that: Spotify, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, where else? Amazon Music. Are we on anything else? I don't know.
That would do.
Whatever.
Just leave us a review, please.
Yeah, just please review, and also reach out to us on Twitter. We'd love to speak to you about the films that we're watching. What your thoughts, your feelings on these films. You can reach out to us at Adjust Your Track. That's a YR, not a your, on Twitter. And yeah, don't forget, if the picture's bad, always adjust your tray.